Keisha Williams felt every step in her tired feet as she walked down the busy streets of downtown Chicago. Her white nursing shoes squeaked slightly against the wet pavement, still damp from the afternoon rain. The October evening air was getting colder, and she pulled her thin jacket tighter around her scrubs. After 12 long hours at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, all she wanted was to get home to her daughter and maybe catch a few minutes of rest before her next shift. But rest wasn't really an option tonight. She had to stop at the grocery store first, then pick up Zara from her neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Rodriguez had been watching her 12-year-old daughter since school ended, and Keisha always felt guilty about asking for so many favors. The single mother life was harder than she'd ever imagined when she was younger. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Zara. "Mom, when are you coming home? I finished my homework." Keisha smiled despite her exhaustion. That girl was everything to her. Smart, responsible, and somehow still optimistic even though they'd been struggling financially for months. Keisha checked her wallet as she walked. $43. Not much, but enough for some basic groceries if she was careful. Rice, beans, maybe some chicken if it was on sale. She'd learned to stretch every dollar over the years, especially since the pandemic had hit their family hard. Her hours at the hospital had been crazy during those months, but the overtime pay had helped. Now things were more stable, but money was still tight. The streets were crowded with people heading home from work. Office workers in expensive suits hurried past her, talking on their phones or staring at their screens. Most of them probably made more in a month than she made in 3, but Keisha had learned not to feel bitter about it. She loved being a nurse, loved helping people when they were scared and hurt. Even when her back ached and her feet were sore, she knew she was making a difference. She turned the corner near the financial district, where the tall glass buildings stretched up toward the darkening sky. This wasn't her usual route home, but there was construction on her normal street, and the bus had dropped her off a few blocks away. The sidewalks here were even busier, filled with people in business clothes heading to fancy restaurants or expensive cars. That's when she saw him. An older man in a dark suit was standing near the crosswalk, but something was wrong. Very wrong. He was swaying slightly like he might fall over. His hand was pressed against his chest, and even from several feet away, Keisha could see that his face looked pale and sweaty. Other people were walking past him without stopping. A few glanced his way, but most just kept going. Maybe they thought he was drunk, or maybe they were just too busy with their own lives to notice. In a big city like Chicago, people learned to mind their own business, but Keisha couldn't ignore what she was seeing. Her nurse training kicked in automatically like a switch flipping in her brain. She'd seen these symptoms too many times in the emergency room. The pale skin, the sweating, the way he was clutching his chest. This looked like a heart attack. She dropped her purse and hurried toward him, her tired feet suddenly moving fast. Sir, are you okay?" she called out as she got closer. The man looked up at her with confused, frightened eyes. He was probably in his 60s, with graying hair and expensive-looking glasses that were now slightly crooked on his face. His breathing was shallow and quick. I don't feel," he started to say, but couldn't finish the sentence. "My name is Keisha, and I'm a registered nurse," she said, speaking clearly and calmly the way she'd learned to do in emergency situations. "Can you tell me where it hurts?" He pointed to his chest with a shaking hand. "It's tight, hard to breathe." Keisha's heart started beating faster, but she kept her voice steady. She'd been in situations like this before, but never on a street corner with no medical equipment and no other staff to help. Still, she knew what to do. "Okay, we're going to get you help right now," she said, pulling out her phone to call 911. With her other hand, she gently guided him to sit down on the sidewalk, leaning him against the wall of a nearby building. What's your emergency?" the operator answered. "This is Keisha Williams. I'm a registered nurse. I have a man here, approximately 60 years old, showing signs of a heart attack. We're at the corner of LaSalle and Madison in downtown Chicago. He's conscious but experiencing chest pain and difficulty breathing." While she gave the operator more details, she kept talking to the man, trying to keep him calm. "What's your name?" she asked. "David," he managed to say between shallow breaths. "Okay, David, I need you to try to relax your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that for me?" She demonstrated taking slow, deep breaths. A small crowd was starting to gather, people finally noticing what was happening. Someone asked if they should call an ambulance, and Keisha told them she already had. Another person offered to direct the paramedics when they arrived. Keisha loosened David's tie and unbuttoned the top button of his shirt to help him breathe easier. She checked his pulse. It was fast and irregular, which worried her. "David, are you taking any medications? Do you have any heart problems?" she asked. He shook his head slightly. "No, never had." Problems before. That wasn't unusual. Heart attacks could happen to anyone, even people who thought they were healthy. Keisha had seen it many times in the hospital. Stress, genetics, lifestyle. There were so many factors that people didn't think about until it was too late. "The ambulance is on its way," she told him, continuing to monitor his breathing and pulse. "You're going to be okay. We caught this early, and that's really important." David's eyes focused on her face. Even through his pain and fear, he seemed to notice something. Here was this woman, a complete stranger, who had stopped everything to help him when dozens of other people had just walked by. Her scrubs told him she was a healthcare worker, but she could have easily kept walking too. She was obviously tired from a long day at work. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Keisha said with a small smile. "Let's get you to the hospital first." The sound of sirens was getting closer. Keisha felt a wave of relief. She'd done what she could with no equipment and no backup, but David needed real medical attention fast. Every minute counted in a situation like this. The ambulance pulled up, and 2 paramedics jumped out with their equipment. Keisha quickly filled them in on David's symptoms and what she'd observed. They immediately started hooking him up to monitors and giving him oxygen. "You did good," one of the paramedics told her as they prepared to load David into the ambulance. "Your quick response probably saved his life." As they wheeled David away, he caught Keisha's eye one more time. "Thank you," he said again, more clearly this time. Keisha nodded and picked up her purse from where she'd dropped it on the sidewalk. The crowd was already dispersing, people going back to their evening routines. For them, it had been an interesting interruption. For her, it had been just another day of helping someone who needed it. She looked at her phone. The whole incident had only taken about 10 minutes, but it felt much longer. Zara was probably wondering where she was. She quickly texted, "Sorry, baby, running a little late." Had to help someone. "Be home soon." As she started walking toward the grocery store again, Keisha thought about David. She hoped he would be okay, that they'd gotten to him in time. She'd probably never know how things turned out for him. That was usually how it worked when you helped a stranger. You did what you could and hoped for the best. Her feet were still tired, and she still had grocery shopping to do and dinner to make for Zara. Tomorrow she'd be back at the hospital for another long shift. Life would go on the way it always did. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness, this decision to stop and help when others kept walking, was about to change everything. 3 days had passed since that evening on LaSalle Street, and Keisha had almost forgotten about the man she'd helped. Almost. She'd thought about him a few times during her shifts, wondering if he was okay, but that was normal for her. As a nurse, she cared about people, even strangers she'd only met for a few minutes. It was a Thursday morning, and she was restocking supplies in the cardiac unit when her supervisor, Linda, approached her with a puzzled look on her face. "Keisha, I just got the strangest call from administration," Linda said, holding a piece of paper in her hand. "Someone's been asking for you specifically. A patient wants to meet with you, but he's not even one of ours. He's in the private wing." Keisha frowned. The private wing was where wealthy patients stayed when they wanted extra privacy and luxury during their hospital visits. She'd only been in there a few times during her 5 years at Northwestern Memorial, usually to help out when they were short-staffed. "Did they say what it was about?" Keisha asked, continuing to organize the medical supplies. "Something about you helping him on the street a few days ago. Ring any bells?" Suddenly, Keisha remembered. The man in the expensive suit, clutching his chest near the crosswalk. David. "Oh, that. I helped someone who was having a heart attack downtown, but I didn't think much of it. Just did what anyone would do." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Well, apparently this guy thinks it was a bigger deal than that. Administration wants you to go see him when you have a break. Room 1247 in the private wing." Keisha felt curious but didn't think too much about it. Maybe David just wanted to say thank you in person. That happens sometimes. Patients or their families would track down the paramedics or bystanders who had helped them during emergencies. It was always nice to hear that someone was doing well after a scary situation. During her lunch break, Keisha made her way to the private wing. She'd only eaten half her sandwich, but she wanted to get this visit over with so she could rest for a few minutes before her afternoon rounds. The private wing was noticeably different from the regular hospital floors. The hallways were quieter, the lighting was softer, and everything looked more like a fancy hotel than a medical facility. Room 1247 was at the end of a long hallway. Keisha knocked gently and heard a voice say, "Come in." She opened the door and was surprised by what she saw. The room was large and bright, with a view of the city skyline. There were flowers everywhere, expensive arrangements that probably cost more than she spent on groceries in a month. And there were people in suits standing around, looking very serious and professional. But what really surprised her was David himself. He looked completely different from the frightened, pale man she'd helped on the street. His color was back to normal. He was sitting up in bed looking alert and comfortable, and he was wearing what looked like silk pajamas instead of a hospital gown. "Keisha," he said with a genuine smile when he saw her. "Please come in. I'm so glad you could come." She stepped into the room, feeling a bit out of place in her regular scrubs among all these well-dressed people. "Hi, David, I'm really glad to see you're feeling better. You gave me quite a scare the other night." "I gave myself quite a scare, too," he laughed. "Please sit down. I want to talk to you." One of the men in suits brought over a comfortable chair for her. Keisha sat down, wondering why there were so many people in the room and why everyone seemed to be treating her like she was someone important. "First, I owe you my life," David said, his voice becoming more serious. "The doctors told me that if you hadn't acted as quickly as you did, I would have died on that sidewalk." The heart attack was massive, and every second counted. Keisha felt a warmth in her chest. It was always meaningful to hear that she'd made a real difference in someone's life, but she still didn't understand why this felt like such a big production. "I'm just glad I was there," she said simply. "Any nurse would have done the same thing." "But you weren't on duty," David pointed out. "You were tired, heading home after a long shift. You could have easily walked past like everyone else did, but you didn't." One of the men in suits stepped forward. "Ms. Williams, perhaps we should explain who Mr. Chen is." David waved his hand. "Let me tell her myself, Richard." He turned back to Keisha. "I should have introduced myself properly that night. But I was a bit distracted by the whole dying thing." Keisha smiled at his attempt at humor. "My full name is David Chen, and I'm the founder and CEO of Chen Tech Solutions." The name didn't mean anything to Keisha right away, but one of the other people in the room handed her a tablet. On the screen was a news article with David's photo and a headline about a major technology company. "Chentech develops software for businesses all over the world," David explained. "We've been around for about 20 years now, and we've been pretty successful." As Keisha scrolled through the article, her eyes widened. The company was worth billions of dollars. Billions. She was looking at photos of David meeting with world leaders, speaking at major conferences and being interviewed on financial news shows. You're really rich," she said, then immediately felt embarrassed for being so blunt. David laughed out loud. "Yes, I suppose I am. But you know what? When I was lying on that sidewalk thinking I might die, all that money didn't matter at all. The only thing that mattered was that a kind stranger cared enough to help me." Keisha was still trying to process this information. She'd saved the life of a billionaire. It felt surreal. "The thing is," David continued, "I've been thinking a lot during my recovery. About life, about what's important, about the people who make a real difference in the world. And I realize that you, Keisha, make more of a difference in a single day than I probably make in a year." "That's not true," Keisha protested. "You run a huge company. You employ thousands of people?" "Yes, but you save lives every day. And from what I've learned about you over the past few days, you do it while facing challenges that most people couldn't handle." Keisha felt uncomfortable. "What do you mean, what you've learned about me?" Richard, the man in the suit, spoke up again. "We hope you don't mind, but we did some research. We wanted to understand who the person was that saved Mr. Chen's life. David leaned forward in his bed. I know you're a single mother. I know you work incredibly hard to support your daughter. I know you put yourself through nursing school while working full-time. And I know that despite everything you've accomplished, you're still struggling financially. Keisha felt her cheeks get hot. She didn't like the idea of strangers looking into her personal life, even if their intentions were good. I don't understand why any of that matters. It matters because it shows what kind of person you are, David said gently. You could have been bitter about your circumstances. You could have walked past me that night thinking that someone else would help, but you didn't. You stopped, you cared, and you acted. He paused for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. I also know that you've always wanted to become a nurse practitioner, but you haven't been able to afford the additional schooling. Keisha was shocked. How did he know about that? She'd barely told anyone about that dream, except for her daughter and a few close friends. The idea of going back to school to become a nurse practitioner had been something she'd thought about for years, but it always seemed impossible. The tuition costs, the time away from work, the risk of losing their apartment if her income dropped, it all seemed too overwhelming. How do you know about that? She asked quietly. Your supervisor Linda mentioned it when we called the hospital looking for you. She said you'd talked about it during staff meetings, about how you wanted to advance your career but couldn't make the finances work. David's expression became very serious. Keisha, I want to help you achieve that dream. Not because I feel like I owe you, though I do, but because I think the world needs more people like you in positions where they can help even more people. Keisha felt her heart start beating faster. She wasn't sure what he was suggesting, but it sounded big. Maybe too big. What are you saying? I'm saying that I want to pay for your nurse practitioner education. All of it. Tuition, books, living expenses while you're in school. Whatever you need. The room went completely silent. Keisha stared at David, not sure she'd heard him correctly. But that's not all, he continued. I also want to offer you a job. A job? But I already have a job. I love being a nurse. I'm not asking you to stop being a nurse. I'm asking you to be a nurse for my company. I want to create a position for you as the Director of Employee Wellness at Chentech. You'd be responsible for developing health and wellness programs for all our employees. Keisha's mind was spinning. This was too much to process. A few days ago, she was walking home from work, tired and worried about money. Now, a billionaire was offering to pay for her education and give her a job that sounded like it would change her entire life. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll think about it, David replied. Take all the time you need. But Keisha, I want you to know that this isn't charity. This is an investment. An investment in someone who has already proven that she can make a difference when it matters most. As Keisha sat in that luxurious hospital room, surrounded by people in expensive suits, she realized that her life had just taken a turn she never could have imagined. The simple decision to help a stranger was about to become something much bigger than she'd ever dreamed possible. That night, Keisha couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced with everything David had told her. In the next room, she could hear Zara breathing softly in her sleep, completely unaware that their lives might be about to change forever. Keisha had come home from the hospital in a daze. When Zara asked about her day, she'd just said it was interesting and left it at that. How do you tell your 12-year-old daughter that a billionaire wants to pay for your education and give you a dream job? It sounded crazy even thinking about it. She'd been disappointed before. Life had taught her to be careful about things that seemed too good to be true. When Zara's father left them 6 years ago, he'd made all kinds of promises about staying involved and helping with money. None of those promises had come true. When she'd applied for financial aid for nursing school, she'd been told she made just enough money to not qualify, but not enough to actually pay for school herself. She'd learned to rely on herself and not get her hopes up about help that might never come. But this felt different. David seemed genuine, and the offer was so specific and detailed. Still, Keisha had questions. Lots of them. The next morning, she called the number Richard had given her. She'd decided she needed to know more before she could even think about making a decision. Mr. Chen's office, this is Patricia speaking. Hi, this is Keisha Williams. David Chen asked me to call if I had any questions about his offer. Of course, Ms. Williams, Mr. Chen has been expecting your call. Can you hold for just a moment? Before Keisha could answer, she was listening to soft classical music. She felt nervous. She wasn't used to calling offices where people had assistants and classical music played while you waited. Keisha! David's voice came through the phone, warm and friendly. I'm so glad you called. I was hoping you would. I have some questions, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Ask me anything. I want you to feel completely comfortable with this decision. Why me? She asked. I mean, you could help anyone. You could fund scholarships for hundreds of nurses. Why are you focusing on just me? David was quiet for a moment. That's a fair question. The truth is, what you did for me wasn't just about medical knowledge. Anyone with basic first aid training might have recognized the signs of a heart attack. But you stopped when everyone else kept walking. You got down on a dirty sidewalk in your clean scrubs. You stayed with me until help arrived, even though you didn't know who I was or if I could even pay you back. He paused. I've been successful in business because I'm good at recognizing potential in people. And I see enormous potential in you, not just as a healthcare provider, but as a leader. I don't know anything about being a leader in the business world, Keisha admitted. You don't need to know about business. You need to know about people, and you obviously do. The position I'm offering isn't really a business job. It's a healthcare job that happens to be in a business setting. Keisha took a deep breath. Can you tell me more about what this job would actually involve? Absolutely. Right now, Chentech has about 8,000 employees across our different locations. We offer basic health insurance, but that's about it. I want to create comprehensive wellness programs, mental health support, preventive care, health education, fitness programs. I want to make sure our employees have access to the kind of health care that keeps them healthy instead of just treating them when they get sick. This was something Keisha could understand. She'd seen too many patients in the emergency room who were there because they couldn't afford preventive care, or because they'd ignored symptoms until they became serious problems. That sounds amazing, she said, but I still don't understand why you think I could do something like that. Because you understand healthcare from the ground up. You've worked with patients who couldn't afford treatment. You know what it's like to be worried about medical bills. You understand the system from the perspective of someone who actually provides care, not just someone who manages it from an office. David's voice became more excited as he talked. I've been reading about workplace wellness programs at other companies, and most of them are designed by people who've never actually worked directly with patients. They're all theoretical, but you could design programs based on real experience with real people. Keisha found herself getting interested despite her worries. What about the nurse practitioner program? How would that work with the job? We'd be flexible. You could start working for us part-time while you're in school, maybe helping to design the programs and get them set up. Then, once you graduate, you'd move into the full-time position. We'd work around your class schedule. And you'd really pay for everything? The whole program? Everything. Tuition, books, lab fees, whatever you need. Plus, we'd pay you a salary for the part-time work while you're in school. Keisha felt her heart beating faster. This was starting to sound real, not just like a fantasy. I want to see where I'd be working, she said suddenly. I want to understand what Chentech is really like before I make any decisions. Of course! David sounded pleased. When can you come? We can arrange a full tour, meetings with the HR team, whatever you want to see. They settled on the following Saturday. Keisha would bring Zara with her. She wasn't comfortable leaving her daughter out of such a big decision, and she wanted Zara to see what this opportunity might mean for their family. When Saturday came, Keisha and Zara took the train downtown to Chentech's headquarters. Keisha had looked up the building online, but seeing it in person was different. It was a gleaming glass tower that stretched up 40 floors, with the company logo displayed prominently near the entrance. Mom, this place is huge, Zara whispered as they walked through the lobby. The lobby itself was impressive. High ceilings, modern art on the walls, and a reception desk that looked like something from a science fiction movie. But what struck Keisha most was how relaxed everyone seemed. People were dressed nicely, but not too formally, and she could hear laughter coming from somewhere nearby. Patricia, David's assistant, met them at the reception desk. She was a friendly woman in her 50s who immediately made both Keisha and Zara feel welcome. Mr. Chen is so excited to show you around, she said as they walked toward the elevators. He's been planning this tour all week. They started on the 20th floor where David's office was located. His office had an amazing view of Lake Michigan, but what impressed Keisha more was how he decorated it. Instead of the typical executive photos and awards, his walls were covered with pictures of Chentech employees and their families, thank you notes from customers, and artwork that looked like it had been made by children. "My employees' kids made those," David explained when he noticed Keisha looking at the drawings. "Every year we have a family day, and the children always give me their artwork. I like having reminders of what's really important." They spent the next 2 hours touring different floors of the building. David showed them the cafeteria, which served healthy, affordable meals to all employees. He showed them the fitness center, which was free for all staff members. He showed them the child care center, where employees could bring their children when school was closed or when they had early meetings. "This is incredible," Keisha said as they watched toddlers playing in a bright, cheerful room staffed by professional child care workers. "Most people would love to have access to something like this." "That's exactly why I want to expand our wellness programs," David said. "I want to set an example for other companies. I want to show that taking care of your employees isn't just the right thing to do. It's also good business." They met with Jennifer, the head of human resources, who explained how the employee wellness position would fit into the company structure. They talked about salary ranges, benefits, and the support system that would be available to help Keisha succeed in her new role. "We've never had a position exactly like this before," Jennifer admitted. "So there would be a lot of room for you to shape the role based on your expertise and vision." The salary range Jennifer mentioned was more than double what Keisha was making at the hospital. Even the part-time salary while she was in school would be more than her current full-time pay. As they rode the elevator back down to the lobby, Zara looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Mom, are you really going to work here?" "I don't know yet, baby." "What do you think?" "I think it would be amazing. Did you see that child care center? And Mr. Chen seems really nice." David had been quiet during the elevator ride, but as they reached the lobby, he turned to Keisha. "I know this is a big decision. I know it probably feels overwhelming, but I want you to know that I'm not just offering you a job. I'm offering you a chance to help create something that could change thousands of lives." He handed her a folder. "This has all the details we discussed: salary information, education benefits, job responsibilities, everything. Take it home, read through it, talk it over with Zara, take as much time as you need." As they walked back to the train station, Keisha felt like her head was spinning. The opportunity was even better than she'd imagined. The salary would mean they could move to a better apartment, maybe even buy a house someday. Zara could go to a better school. Keisha could finally stop worrying about money and focus on her career and her daughter. But it was also terrifying. She'd be leaving behind everything familiar: her job at the hospital, her co-workers who had become like family, the routine she'd built over 5 years. She'd be entering a world she knew nothing about, working with people who had college degrees and business experience she didn't have. That night, after Zara had gone to bed, Keisha sat at their small kitchen table with the folder David had given her. She read through every page carefully, trying to understand all the details. The more she read, the more real it became. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to completely change their lives. And for the first time since that night on LaSalle Street, Keisha began to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was real. 2 weeks later, Keisha sat in her car outside Northwestern Memorial Hospital, taking deep breaths. Today was her last day as a staff nurse. In her purse was her resignation letter, and in 3 days, she would start her new life at Chentech. The decision hadn't been easy, but after countless conversations with Zara, sleepless nights weighing pros and cons, and several more meetings with David, she'd finally said yes. Walking into the hospital felt different, knowing it was her final shift. These hallways had been her second home for 5 years. She knew every corner, every squeaky floorboard, every nurse and doctor on her floor. Linda, her supervisor, had been supportive, but sad to see her go. "You're making the right choice," Linda had told her during their last meeting. "But we're going to miss you like crazy. You're one of the best nurses we've ever had." That morning, Keisha made her usual rounds, checking on patients and administering medications. But everything felt bittersweet. Mrs. Patterson, in room 314, was recovering from hip surgery and always asked about Keisha's daughter. Mr. Rodriguez had been battling diabetes complications and trusted Keisha more than any other nurse. These relationships had meant everything to her. During her lunch break, she found herself in the break room with 3 other nurses she'd worked with for years. They were talking about weekend plans and complaining about the new computer system the hospital had installed. "I still can't believe you're really leaving," said Tracy, a nurse who'd started working at the hospital the same week as Keisha. "It feels like the end of an era." "I'm scared," Keisha admitted, stirring her coffee absently. "What if I can't do this new job? What if I don't fit in with all those business people?" "Are you kidding me?" said Miguel, another nurse who'd become one of her closest friends. "You're one of the smartest, most caring people I know. If anyone can figure out how to help people in a new way, it's you." As her shift ended, Keisha said goodbye to each patient individually. Some of them didn't understand why their favorite nurse was leaving, and explaining it was harder than she'd expected. "You helped save someone's life, and now he's helping you. Build a better life for your family," she told Mrs. Patterson. "Sometimes, good things really do happen to good people." Her first day at Chentech was overwhelming in ways she hadn't expected. David had arranged for her to start part-time while she prepared for nursing school, but even part-time felt like stepping into a different universe. Her office was on the 15th floor, with a view of the city that still took her breath away every morning. The office itself was bigger than her and Zara's entire bedroom at home. It had a real wooden desk, a comfortable chair that probably cost more than she used to make in a week, and a computer that was faster than anything she'd ever used. Jennifer from HR had assigned her a mentor named Alex, a young woman who'd been with the company for 3 years and understood the culture. Alex was friendly and patient, but sometimes Keisha felt like they were speaking different languages. "So we'll need to do a needs assessment across all departments," Alex explained during their first planning meeting. "Then we can create KPIs for the wellness initiatives and present them to the C-suite for approval." Keisha nodded, trying to look like she understood. KPIs? C-suite? She'd never heard these terms before, but she was too embarrassed to ask. That first week was full of meetings, acronyms, and concepts that were completely new to her. She sat in conference rooms with people who talked about synergies and leveraging resources and moving the needle on employee engagement. Everyone was nice to her, but she felt like an outsider trying to learn a foreign language. The hardest part was the doubt that crept in during quiet moments. Late at night, after helping Zara with homework in their new apartment, they'd moved to a better neighborhood as soon as Keisha's first paycheck came through. She'd lie in bed wondering if she'd made a huge mistake. But then something started to change. About 3 weeks into the job, David asked her to join him for lunch in the executive dining room. She'd been avoiding that part of the building, intimidated by the idea of eating with senior executives, but David insisted. "How are you settling in?" he asked as they sat at a quiet table overlooking the lake. "It's different," Keisha said carefully. "Everyone's been very nice, but I feel like I'm learning a whole new language." David laughed. "You mean all the business jargon?" "Yeah, that takes some getting used to. But you know what? Half the time, people use those fancy terms to say simple things. When Alex talks about KPIs, she just means ways to measure whether something is working or not." "Really? Really? And when people talk about the C-suite, they just mean me and the other executives. Nothing fancy about it." He leaned forward. "Can I tell you something? In your first 3 weeks here, you've already identified problems that we've been ignoring for years." Keisha was surprised. "What do you mean?" "That report you wrote about the cafeteria food options. You noticed that we weren't offering enough healthy choices for people with diabetes or heart conditions. Our previous food service consultant never mentioned that, and he had 3 degrees and charged us twice what we're paying you." Keisha felt a small glow of pride. She had noticed that the cafeteria, while nice, didn't have many options for people who needed to watch their sodium or sugar intake. "And your suggestion about having a nurse available during flu shot season? Brilliant. We used to just send people to their regular doctors. which meant a lot of them never got vaccinated. As the weeks went by, Keisha began to find her footing. She realized that her medical background gave her insights that nobody else in the company had. When the marketing team complained about stress-related sick days, she could suggest specific stress reduction techniques. When the accounting department had several employees dealing with back problems from sitting at desks all day, she knew exactly what kind of ergonomic changes could help. Her confidence grew as she saw her suggestions being implemented and making real differences in people's lives. The company added healthier food options to the cafeteria. They started offering on-site flu shots. They brought in a physical therapist to teach proper posture and stretching exercises. Meanwhile, she'd started her nurse practitioner classes. Going back to school while working was challenging, but it was a different kind of challenge than juggling 2 jobs and raising Zara alone. Now she had support. David had made sure she could adjust her work schedule around her class schedule, and Chentech even had a tutor program to help employees who were pursuing additional education. Zara was thriving, too. Their new apartment was in a better school district, and for the first time in years, Keisha didn't have to worry about money for school supplies or field trips. Zara had joined the science club at her new school and was talking about maybe becoming a doctor someday. "You know what's funny, Mom?" Zara said one evening as they cooked dinner together in their new, bigger kitchen. "I used to worry about you all the time. When you worked those double shifts at the hospital, I could tell you were tired and stressed. But now you seem happier." Keisha paused in chopping vegetables for their salad. "I am happier, baby. Not just because of the money, though that helps. But I feel like I'm using my nursing skills in a new way. I'm still helping people, but now I can help prevent problems instead of just treating them after they happen." About 6 months into her new job, David asked Keisha to present her first major wellness program proposal to the board of directors. She'd been working on a comprehensive mental health support system for employees, including on-site counseling, stress management workshops, and peer support groups. The night before the presentation, Keisha was terrified. She'd never presented to a board of directors before. These were successful business people who were used to polished presentations and complex financial projections. What if they ask questions I can't answer? She worried to David during a practice session. "Then you say you don't know, but you'll find out," he replied. "Keisha, you've spent months researching this program. You've talked to employees. You've consulted with mental health professionals. You've looked at successful programs at other companies. You know this material better than anyone in that room." The next morning, Keisha stood in front of 12 board members in Chentech's main conference room. Her hands were shaking slightly as she began her presentation. But as she started talking about the employees she'd interviewed and the needs she'd identified, her confidence returned. She wasn't just presenting a business proposal. She was sharing stories about real people. The software developer who'd been struggling with anxiety, the customer service representative dealing with depression, the manager who was overwhelmed by work-life balance issues. She talked about how mental health problems were affecting productivity and employee retention, but more importantly, how they were affecting people's lives. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then one of the board members, an older woman named Dorothy, started clapping. Soon everyone was applauding. "This is exactly what we need," Dorothy said. "Not just another employee benefit, but a real program designed by someone who understands health care. From the ground up, the board approved the program, unanimously, and asked Keisha to expand it to all of Chentech's locations, nationwide. As she walked back to her office after the meeting, Keisha thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she'd been a tired hospital nurse walking home from a double shift, worried about paying bills. Now she was designing healthcare programs that would help thousands of people, pursuing her dream of becoming a nurse practitioner, and providing a better life for her daughter. But the most amazing part wasn't the money or the impressive job title. It was the realization that everything she'd learned from her years of struggle, understanding what it meant to worry about healthcare costs, knowing what real patient care looked like, having experienced the challenges of working multiple jobs to make ends meet, all of that was now helping her create better programs for other people. She hadn't just changed careers. She'd found a way to use her life experiences to make a difference on a scale she'd never imagined possible. And it all started with the simple decision to help a stranger on a busy street corner. 2 years had passed since that life-changing evening on LaSalle Street, and Keisha could barely recognize her own life. She stood in front of the mirror in her new home, a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard where Zara could play, adjusting the navy blue dress she'd bought for tonight's event. It was the second annual gala for the Chen Williams Foundation, named after both her and David, though she'd initially protested having her name attached to something so important. "You look beautiful, Mom," Zara said, appearing in the doorway. At 14 now, she was taller and more confident, thriving in her new school and already talking about colleges she wanted to attend. "Are you nervous about your speech tonight?" Keisha smiled at her daughter. "A little, but the good kind of nervous, you know? The kind you get when you're about to do something that really matters." The gala was being held at the Fairmont Hotel downtown, and as their car pulled up to the entrance, Keisha saw hundreds of people walking into the elegant ballroom. Healthcare workers, business leaders, community activists, and families who had been helped by the Foundation's programs. It was overwhelming to think that all of this had grown from a simple act of kindness on a street corner. David met them at the entrance, looking distinguished in his tuxedo, but still wearing the warm smile that had made her trust him from the beginning. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as they walked through the lobby. "I think so," Keisha replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe how big this has gotten." And it had gotten big. What started as David's desire to help one person had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined. The Chen Williams Foundation now operated 3 community health clinics in underserved neighborhoods across Chicago. They'd provided full scholarships to over 200 healthcare workers pursuing advanced degrees. The workplace wellness programs Keisha had developed at Chen Tech were now being used by dozens of other companies nationwide. But tonight wasn't just about celebrating what they'd accomplished. Tonight was about announcing their biggest project yet. As they entered the ballroom, Keisha was amazed by what she saw. The room was filled with familiar faces: nurses from her old hospital, employees from Chen Tech, families from the neighborhoods where their clinics operated. There were also people she'd only read about in business magazines, wealthy philanthropists who had heard about their work and wanted to support it. At one table, she spotted Carmen, a young woman who'd been one of the first recipients of their nursing scholarships. Carmen had grown up in the same neighborhood where Keisha had raised Zara, and she'd always dreamed of becoming a nurse but couldn't afford school. Now she was working as a pediatric nurse at one of the Foundation's clinics and pursuing her master's degree. "Ms. Keisha," Carmen called out, jumping up to give her a hug. "I can't believe we're all here together like this. How's your master's program going?" Keisha asked. "It's challenging but amazing. And I keep thinking about what you told me when I first applied for the scholarship, that every person we help has the potential to help dozens of others. I see it every day now. That had become one of the Foundation's core principles. They didn't just provide direct help. They invested in people who would go on to help others. Every nurse they put through school would care for thousands of patients over their career. Every clinic they opened would serve an entire community for decades. As dinner was served, David stood up to address the crowd. He talked about the Foundation's accomplishments over the past 2 years, but he spent most of his time talking about Keisha. 2 years ago, I thought I was a successful person, he said, looking out at the audience. I had built a company, made money, achieved what most people would consider the American dream. But lying on that sidewalk, facing what I thought were my final moments, I realized that all of that success meant nothing if I hadn't actually made the world a better place. He gestured toward Keisha. This remarkable woman saved my life that night, but she did something even more important. She showed me what real success looks like. It's not about how much money you make or how famous you become. It's about how many people you help along the way. When it was Keisha's turn to speak, she walked to the podium feeling a mix of pride and humility. 2 years ago, she'd been terrified of speaking in front of Chen Tech's 12-person board. Tonight, she was addressing over 500 people, and she felt calm and confident. I want to tell you about a day that changed my life, she began. But it wasn't the day I helped David on that street corner. It was about 6 months later when I walked into our first community clinic on the south side. She paused, remembering that moment clearly. There was a line of people waiting outside before we even opened the doors. Families who had been going without health care because they couldn't afford it. Children who needed vaccinations. Adults who had been ignoring serious health problems because they didn't know where to go for help. The audience was completely quiet, hanging on every word. That day I realized that what happened between David and me wasn't just a lucky coincidence. It was a reminder that we're all connected. When we help one person, we're really helping everyone they'll go on to touch. She talked about Maria, a single mother who brought her diabetic son to one of their clinics. The boy's diabetes had been poorly controlled because Maria couldn't afford regular doctor visits or the right medications. But with proper care from the clinic, his health improved dramatically, his grades went up, and he was now planning to become a doctor himself. She talked about Robert, a construction worker who came to their clinic for a routine checkup and discovered he had high blood pressure that could have killed him if left untreated. He was now managing his condition and had become a health advocate in his neighborhood, encouraging other men to get regular checkups. Every person we help goes on to help others, Keisha said. Carmen, who's here tonight, has already delivered dozens of babies and helped countless families. The nurses we've put through school are now working in hospitals, clinics, and communities all across the country. The wellness programs we've developed are helping employees at companies nationwide live healthier lives. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Keisha looked out at the audience and smiled. Tonight, I'm excited to announce our next project. Thanks to the incredible generosity of our donors and partners, we're opening not just 1 or 2 new clinics, but 10. 10 new community health centers in cities across the Midwest, each one designed to serve neighborhoods that have been underserved for too long. The applause was thunderous. David joined Keisha on stage, and together they unveiled a map showing where the new clinics would be located. Detroit, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and 6 other cities that needed better healthcare access. But that's not all, David said as the applause died down. We're also launching the Healthcare Heroes Initiative, a program that will provide full scholarships and career support to 1,000 healthcare workers over the next 5 years. After the formal program ended, Keisha found herself surrounded by people who wanted to thank her, ask questions, or share their own stories. A young man told her how the wellness program at his company had helped him manage his anxiety. A grandmother explained how their clinic had helped her granddaughter overcome asthma. A business executive wanted to know how his company could implement similar wellness programs. Later that evening, as the crowd was thinning out, Keisha found a quiet moment with David on the hotel's terrace overlooking the city. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked, looking out at the lights of Chicago. "Every day," David replied. "But not just because you saved my life. I think about how different everything could have been if you had just walked past like everyone else did." "I almost did," Keisha admitted. "I was tired, worried about money, thinking about everything I needed to do when I got home. But something made me stop. What do you think it was?" Keisha considered the question. "I think it was just who I am. My mom always taught me that we're put on this earth to help each other. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people. That night, someone needed help, so I helped." David nodded. "That's exactly why all of this has worked. It wasn't really about the money or the business connections. It was about 2 people who believe that helping others is the most important thing we can do." As they stood there looking out over the city, Keisha thought about all the lives that had been touched by what started as a simple moment of human kindness. The nurses working in hospitals because of their scholarships, the families getting health care at their clinics, the employees at companies across the country who were healthier because of wellness programs she'd helped design. "You know what's funny?" she said to David. "I used to think that being successful meant having enough money to not worry about bills. Now I realize that real success is knowing that your life has made other people's lives better." David smiled. "I couldn't agree more." 3 months later, Keisha was invited to speak at a national healthcare conference. As she stood before an audience of doctors, nurses, and healthcare administrators from across the country, she told the story of that night on LaSalle Street one more time. But she ended her speech with a challenge. "Every day, each of you has the opportunity to change someone's life. Maybe it's a patient who needs extra attention, or a colleague who's struggling, or a stranger on the street who needs help. You never know which small act of kindness might start a chain reaction that changes hundreds or thousands of lives. She paused and looked out at the audience. 2 years ago, I was a tired nurse walking home from work. I made a split-second decision to help a stranger, and it transformed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. The question I want to leave you with is this: what decision will you make today that might change everything? As Keisha left the stage that day, she knew that the ripple effects of that one moment of compassion were still spreading, touching lives in ways she might never even know about. And that, she realized, was the most beautiful part of all.